Jen has a controversial idea. I mostly agree with her. Floor crossing is good. We'll talk about it. Also, remember and stay and what we owe each other and the country. It's the Lime Podcast. This episode of the Lime Podcast is brought to you by Forestry for the Future. Canada's housing crisis demands bold, scalable solutions. Build Canada Homes is an opportunity to leverage Canadian wood in modern construction. Wood-based methods like mass timber and modular construction can significantly reduce build times, waste, and carbon emissions while supporting local economies. Expanding building codes, streamlining approvals, and prioritizing domestic wood in federal projects could double demand and foster job creation in rural and northern communities. Despite trade challenges and market volatility, a partnership between industry and government is vital to stabilize the sector, enhance competitiveness, and deliver innovative, sustainably sourced Canadian wood products for homes across Canada and abroad. With capacity growing across provinces, stable demand and predictable financing are key to unlocking the sector's potential. We need to build Canada Homes with Canadian wood. To learn more, visit forestryforthefuture.ca. All right. Confession time.
Confession.
We are probably courting catastrophe.
Of course, as we usually do.
It's become, if you're a regular viewer, listener of ours, it's almost a running joke now. I think it is a running joke. Every time we record an episode early, something catastrophic happens. This is recorded later than usual in the day, but a day early. Recording this one later on Thursday. It's my fault. I had travel plans for this weekend and things got blown up and I have to leave on the Friday and I'm just not going to be here to record. So my apologies if massive breaking news happens between Thursday afternoon and when this goes out in about 24 hours. Every time we've done this, something horrific happens. So fingers crossed. You're not fomenting controversy? Are you courting controversy?
I mean, I have been known on occasion to take an unpopular position, just on principle, really just to sort of you can't really know where you stand on things until you're willing to push the boundaries of both edges. So we talked a little bit about
there's two solitudes in life.
Okay,
it's the people who think it's a good idea to thresh out your thoughts in public by talking about them and bouncing ideas off your friends and your confidants and tens of thousands of random listeners and viewers. And then there's the 98% of the population that understands that's a terrible idea and the idea would scare the absolute shit out of them. Unfortunately, we're both in the 2%.
We're both in the 2%. And that's why we have a podcast. So that's just where we live. It's fine. There have to be people like us in the world, right?
So what notion are we going to explore the space for here?
I would like to explore the space. Okay, so last week we talked a little bit about the floor crossing that happened just ahead of the budget. Chris D'Entremont. We're going to talk about my inability to pronounce names later in the podcast. That's segment 3. Cross the floors from the Conservatives to the Liberals. This has caused an enormous uproar because, of course, this gets the Liberals, one seat closer to their majority government. They're still two seats shy. There was some talk about Genero from Edmonton also crossing the floor. He decided instead to, quit politics and spend more time with his family. Please, please, please don't hurt my family. Instead of doing that. And of course, whenever there's a floor crossing, people kind of freak out. People get strongly negative about that. And there was even some reports that D'Entremont was booed at a Remembrance Day ceremony this week. I think that I would like to kind of defend the floor crossing. Oh, is that going to be fun? I know some Conservatives are really going to love this. They're going to love that I'm going to do this.
You know what this is, Jen? This is shout out to our buddy Paul Wells, who wrote that column a few years ago called The Slopes of Lyle. The Slopes of Lyle was a reference he created, and he was using Greg Lyle, I think his name is, the pollster. Mm-hmm. And he basically said there are some issues where your view on whether or not something is a good idea depends entirely on who's doing it. And he said that, like, the polling drop from approve to disapprove is what he called the slopes of Lyle. Floor crossing, when it's coming your way, it is a sign of moral courage that someone had seen the light and was prepared to risk professional and personal consequences to come stand with the right side. When it's someone leaving your team, it is a betrayal, the act of a traitor, and clearly a sign of a moral defect. This is why when it comes to floor crossings, I just find them interesting and funny, and I don't get that wrapped up in it philosophically, because everyone's view on them hinges on who's going to what team. There actually isn't a moral standard here.
Well, except I do think there kind of is a moral standard we can peg to this that avoids the slopes of Lyle problem. And that is, my position on this is that a lot of people, why they get so angry about floor crossing is because they feel that it's a betrayal. And the reason why they feel that it's a betrayal is because when you sign that ballot, we all know that most of us can't be arsed to really understand the beliefs or systems of the actual individual person they're voting for. And so they engage in a heuristic. They sort of just, okay, I'm with the Conservative Party, I'm with the Liberal Party, I'm with the NDP, and they just sign for the party. And so people know that they're not really, people don't think that they're voting for the individual, they think they're voting for the party. And so when that person then goes and crosses the floor, it's a betrayal of that vote for the party. The problem is that that's bad civics. That's not how our system actually works. You're not voting for the party. Sorry, you're not. You're voting for the individual. You're voting for the MP himself or herself. You're voting for the person, the name on the ballot. And so the person you need to get informed about isn't just the party. You need to get informed about that individual person. And the fact that you all missed civics lessons and don't understand this doesn't make it a moral failing for that person to cross the floor. So that's just how this. I understand that on the practical reality of how people vote. But look, this is basic civics, guys. You're not voting for the party. You're voting for the candidate. And also, by the way, if we had more of an understanding of that collectively, and if we understood that we were voting for the individual, not the party, we might actually have a system that worked better, because that is a system in which the MPs would be empowered to represent their own constituents regardless of the wishes of their party. Like right now, we have a system in which MPs are highly disempowered, where they have been very much effectively whipped into shape and into voting on strict partisan lines on most issues most of the time, because they don't feel as if they are empowered to act as individuals, as representatives of their constituents and their constituencies. And that's not how the system is actually supposed to work. How this is actually supposed to work is that the actual locus of power should sit with the individual MP, who may be affiliated to a party but may not be affiliated to a party. And their ability to vote with the party should rest in that party apparatus's ability to engage in various forms of persuasive power, to vote in line with the party. So when I say I have no issues with floor crossings, I have no issues with how the system is supposed to fundamentally work. And floor crossings are just part of the game, guys. Like, nobody's cheating here. This is literally how the system is supposed to work. And by the way, there's nothing to stop the Conservatives from actively courting Liberals, Blocs, or even NDP MPs to crossing the floor to their side. There's nothing to stop them from playing the winner's game. Now, I realize this isn't necessarily going to happen, but look, they could be active. They're not that far away from a majority themselves. If they could get how many seats did they finally get?
They would need a few dozen, so it would be a slog. But anything's possible, I guess.
Sure, you'd need a few dozen, but there's nothing to stop them from actively seeking a few dozen floor crossers and forming a majority government themselves. That's how the system. Now, I'm not think that that's going to happen. That's because the incentives aren't arranged for them to do that easily. But that's how the system works, guys. The party with the most seats gets the majority. So if you can't win it in the election, there's nothing undemocratic or inappropriate about you courting floor crossers to the other side. But instead, the Conservatives are losing their mind and acting like giant babies because d'Entremont decided to cross the floor for his own internal interests. And guess what? Individual interest is also part of one of the hooks and crooks that's used to compel party compliance. So, wah. The system is what it is. Play with the game. Like this is like, No illegal moves here have been detected. They just didn't like the outcome.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. Everything you've said is factually accurate.
I know, but it's emotionally unsatisfying. So this is why people don't like me. I get it.
It is emotionally unsatisfying, but I mostly agree with you, but I am, for the sake of an entertaining podcast, I'm going to push back a little bit on one specific way. Okay. So before I do, I want people to understand I'm playing the role of opposite here, because I fundamentally think Jen is basically correct. And one of the things I have no patience for are politicians pretending they're not hypocritical. I'm actually okay with them being hypocritical. I understand that the game is played in ways that require kind of the slopes of Lyle to be a thing sometimes. But what I don't like is when they lie to me to my face about it. It's like, and they try to say, no, it's not hypocrisy. This time it's different. This is different. I'm like, yeah, you know what? You lie to yourself as much as you need to. Don't waste my time with it. So that's kind of my attitude here. I also personally think, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, I don't like floor crossing. And I think my preference would be anyone who quits a caucus either needs to submit to a by-election or has to sit as an independent. I don't like floor crossing, but I'll get to a bit more why in a minute. But fundamentally, in terms of the law and the politics, you are absolutely correct. But it also reminds me a little bit, and this is going to be gross, so sorry. You know that you're not supposed to stick Q-tips in your ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, apparently that's bad.
But we all do it because otherwise our ears get itchy.
Yeah. So, I forget which company owns Q-tips, but in the broader cotton swab industry, these guys are selling
basically the tobacco industry of our day.
Well, not exactly, although there are smoking alternatives we could mention. They have labels on the boxes that say things like "Don't stick them in your ears." Meanwhile, they know full well that 99.9% of these things are going right into some dude's ear. And there is just certain things we have to pretend aren't a thing. And I think the thing we're pretending isn't a thing here is that voters are stupid. And, it's all well and good for you and I to come up here and talk about civics. And you have to understand you're voting for the person who shall represent your constituency in the capital. You're not voting for a party. The problem is, you are. And you and I, and we could probably go find 3 or 4 other columnists who get misty about the way our democracy is supposed to work. We know what the people are really doing. And at a certain point, even though I do agree with you, at a certain point, are we just being disingenuous about pretending that people are not getting screwed when they pick a party and then the guy stabs him in the back and changes party? And are we is the appropriate response to that to go, you should have paid more attention in high school civics, you moron? Or is it to go, after 150 some odd years of this, the system is what it is and we should recognize that and change it? And I'm not saying you should be consigned for all eternity to stay in a caucus. You can leave and you can be an independent. Should we change the rules on floor crossing? I don't think so. But I do think about it.
But here's my response to that. Okay, here's my, again, in the spirit of open inquiry. Here's my response to that. Stupid people who choose to be willfully ignorant about how the basics of their democratic system operate deserve to be punished.
See, the problem is that's what I'm probably 70-30 on this issue, and that's my 70. I know. I'm real sorry. I'm sorry. Am I supposed to change 700 odd years of the Westminster parliamentary system and how it fundamentally functions to accommodate your inability to understand a basic fact about how your democratic system works, fellow adult? No. Look, if you're too stupid to educate yourself, then don't vote. See, I don't know what to say. This is my fundamental issue against mandatory voting. I don't think we need more stupid people voting. Yeah,
I think
too.
I think that the world that power belongs to the people who show up.
Oh, and I go further. I know that in the U.S. context, this stuff has a pretty ugly history, but I really do think there should be some civics test component before you're allowed to vote. And I know that was like Jim Crow, but like, I don't like stupid people voting.
I have no issue with. Look, I'm a believer in representative democracy, and I don't like to put
how can you be?
Challenges.
You live in one.
I live in a representative.
But how can you believe in this?
Like I don't like. I don't like vote. I don't approve of gerrymandering. I don't approve of unnecessarily blocks to access. I don't approve of unnecessary lines or hindrances to voting. I think voting should be widely accessible, widely advertised, and fairly done. Right? Like I don't like civics tests. I don't like that. For me, it's perfectly reasonable to say that the people who are engaged enough to show up are the people who are choosing to take responsibility for their own representative democracy. And I'm happy to leave power in those people's hands. Beyond that, I don't feel the need to engage in a mandatory voting kind of scenario, because I don't think that's a good outcome that leads to better outcomes for all of us. If you're engaged enough to show up, I'm assuming that you're an adult over the age of 18, and you've chosen to educate yourself to a degree that you feel comfortable with, that you're comfortable marking a ballot. And I'm sorry, but I don't have sympathy for you if after the fact you say, but I was voting for the Conservatives, that's not fair. That just tells me that you failed to educate yourself about your own system well enough to cast a ballot in the first place. Sorry, you maybe should have literally gone to the Google machine, spent 30 seconds trying to get to know the candidate you were voting for to represent you in Parliament, and maybe educated yourself to a minimal degree so that you could be happy with that individual regardless of what party he was attached to. And I think that like this whole idea that we vote for parties has been utterly corrosive, and it's a huge part of why our current parliamentary system is broken.
Yeah.
It's broken as a result because of this misapprehension about how our system works.
I know.
I'm also going to get into the part of the reason why our system is broken is because we've tried to adopt these ostensibly more democratic American-style primaries to voting or to electing leaders. No, you as an individual shouldn't be voting for the leader of the party. You know who should be selecting the leader of a party? Here's where I'm getting real old school. The elected members of caucus.
The caucus.
The elected members of caucus are supposed to be the ones who choose the leader in a Westminster parliamentary system. And the more we move away from that, and the more we try and create these weird little primary systems to drag more fundraising dollars and voters in, and data points about potential voters into the party system, the more you're taking actual power away from the individual MPs and putting it more in less and less accountable party structures. It's bad. It's bad what we've done here. I demand a return. God damn it! Return. Right. I know I'm right.
You're right about all of this. I know it
won't matter, but I'm right. But
you're also wrong.
I know. No, I know.
Because here's the problem. You're right. But you sound a little bit to me like someone like a shopkeep who operates entirely on the honor system and is going bankrupt, but is still saying the honor system is virtuous.
No, that's great. The honor system.
We've destroyed democracy.
We've destroyed it. No, we fucked it up. I get it. And there's nothing we can do about it now. But look, I still don't think that I'm going to pander to the stupidity of the voters who don't understand why floor crossings are part of our system. I'm not willing to pander to them.
But are we pandering, or are we like putting child-safe caps on the bottle of sleeping pills? Do we have to protect ourselves from voters who can't be asked to learn a 30-minute civic lesson?
I like a dynamic parliament. I guess I just like a dynamic parliament.
It gives us stuff to write about.
Yeah. Well, no, look, I mean, a minority, I like a parliament that forces people to engage in pan-partisan ways as much as possible. I think that human tribalism is a bad thing. I think that human tribalism is becoming worse in the age of social media. I like the idea of having a parliamentary system in which parties from people from different groups, tribes, and perspectives
can work together on a case-by-case basis on things like the budget, or maybe at a committee meeting, or maybe dealing with a particular bit of law. And I think one of the ways in which Parliament absolutely collapsed and ceased to work effectively or functionally during the last Trudeau government was that ability of parties to work together, even at a committee level, just totally collapsed. And everything became about, well, we're not going to make this bill better by finding ways to engage in corrective dissent. Instead, everything became about, we're right, we're not changing anything, we're bringing in the witnesses that support our point of view. We're not going to allow any amendment. We're not going to allow dissent. And that reduced even like stupid parliamentary committee meetings to point scoring exercises in which everybody was trying to embarrass one another in order to get their latest funding, to get to clip to put it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like this is not that's not how the system is supposed to work. That's not how a system is supposed to function. And I think one of the ways we can kind of break that stranglehold of hyperpolarized partisan fuckwankery is to move back to a system that recognizes and respects the power that exists within the individual MP, and also to create a dynamic environment where you do have conservatives working with liberals, working with NDP, working with Bloc on a case-by-case basis where those moments are appropriate. And a dynamic parliament that creates a certain degree of smoothing to allow for floor crossing in certain situations, I think can only potentially help that outcome. It will create a more chaotic outcome in certain circumstances, like a minority parliament. But I don't necessarily think that I want to create unnecessary blocks to that kind of movement across parties. I want individuals to be empowered to go where their conscience takes them on a case-by-case basis. And if their conscience, for whatever reason, or even their self-interest, is saying, you know what, it makes more sense for me to support a thin liberal majority government that is more or less in alignment with my values and what I think my constituents want from me, than it is to hold fast to a conservative party that's going down the goddamn tube. I want them to be empowered to do that on a case-by-case basis where situation and context warrants it.
By the end of this segment, I'm going to be full Starship Troopers. Like, you have to serve to be a citizen and everyone else is a civilian. Boy, you know, again, I'm 70% with you, but like that 30% of me is loud right now. And it's telling me that the problem we have right now is a theoretical expectation versus observed performance. Because you're right about everything. Everything you're saying is correct, but it's not working.
Well, no, but it's not working in a position. Here's my theory. My theory is that in a parliament where we normalize floor crossing is a parliament in which individual MPs are radically more empowered than they are right now, and can actually start taking back some of their power from the parties.
But there isn't a button to do that. And that's why the Conservative
Party.
Like I can't push the normalized parliament button.
No, but I'm just saying the more people who cross the floor, the more floor crossing gets normalized, and the more floor crossing gets normalized, the more power rests in the individual MP and out of the hands of the actual party apparatus.
But they're a self-selected group, though.
In this, like, what do you mean self-selected group?
The people who are actually in the position to cross the floor, thereby gradually normalizing it, are the people who have been selected by the party processes, which have been optimized to deal with the low info voters who just show up and vote for the red guy or the blue guy or the orange guy.
And that's fine. But as I said, the only way that gets normalized over time is more people just cross the floor. Like, and also I want floor crossing back and forth. Like, that's what I want. I want, like, literally, I want the NDP looking around like, this is collapsing. Great. Where am I going to, like, I have no issues with floor crossing either way. And I think that to try and complain about it and call this a great moral compulsion or a moral failing that's not respecting the democratic will of the, that's a loser talk.
Yeah, of course.
That's loser talk. Right?
Our friend Ken Bosenko always says electoral reform is for losers, right? Like, only the people who are on the losing end think there's a problem.
Yeah. Firstly, I would have no problem if the seat counts were reversed and the Conservatives were 3 seats short. You can't tell me that there's anything on God's green earth that would prevent them from being absolutely ruthless in the pursuit of finding floor crossers from the other parties. They absolutely would be, and they'd dangle every stick and every carrot they had at their disposal in order to get that majority. They would be absolutely ruthless in the pursuit of that. And I have no problem with that. And by the way, I have no problem with even if the Conservatives want to make a play for a majority government right now by getting the however many seats they would need to get.
I checked.
And
30.
30, fine. I mean, 30 is that's a hard sell in the current environment.
Like 5 NDPs.
Yeah, well, who knows? I'm saying but I have no issues with them pursuing that ruthlessly right now. And the more people who cross the floor in alignment with their interests and their constituents' values and needs, the less power the parties actually hold. And by the way, that's why the parties hate it so much. And that's why you see the parties lose their shit every time there's a floor crosser, because it's a fundamental abrogation of party unity and party power and control over individual MPs.
Yeah, look, again, you're right about everything, but
you don't like it.
No, you're right about everything, but you're arguing it intellectually, and I agree with you because I'm also overweighted to left brain versus right brain, which apparently actually is bullshit, but we'll still use it as an expression.
Whatever.
The reality, again, it just as observed performance is the net effect of what you're proposing is that the hyper-partisan brainwashed zombies that are attracted to a life as part of the political machine that exists are going to suddenly decide en masse to break it.
Well, no, but I'm saying that once you start to get 4 or 5 of these floor crossings, 6, 7 of these floor crossings, firstly, the emotional weight of the first is broken. So it becomes easier for every subsequent member to do it. And secondly, over time, I think you get a healthier and less polarized parties-driven parliamentary system.
But
I think there's a moral argument for it.
What magical intervention between now and then knocks us off the trajectory we're already on, which is to ever greater party control? Because we have to look at the trend line, right?
No, that's great. So the only thing that knocks us off is that something has to change, and the thing that's changing, and I will tell you the thing that's changing right now. It's the increasing normalization of minority parliaments. That's what's happening. Because the number of minority parliaments we've had in the last 10 years. That's not
a lot.
That's a lot. And I would say that as the hyperpartisan nature is healing. Nature takes its own course. So as the whole electorate becomes more and more partisan and less functional, what happens is there's going to be over time more and more of these really thin minority parliaments, which is going to incentivize more and more floor crossing over time, which over time will hopefully decouple the power from the party apparatus, and over time attract more interesting people into parliament because they're starting to say, wait a minute, I as an individual might actually hold more power than some backbench MP who needs to suck up to the leader in order to get anything done. Because I as an individual have actual currency and an ability to negotiate on behalf of my constituents, because my vote is actually powerful now in a way that it isn't in a majority government or a perpetual majority government situation. Yeah. So that I think is going to be the thing that starts to shift the norms here, is just more and more consistent minority governments. That's my theory.
So last week on the podcast, you read for me a tweet, I think, by a conservative. It was just a groveling loyalty statement, right? And the groveling loyalty statements have continued between now and then. And I think I bring that up because what you're talking about is a gradual process of sort of a loosening of the discipline of party loyalty. What I think is going to happen instead, at least at first, is that the immune system response of all these parties is going to be to quadruple down on internal discipline, which will have a filtering effect of people who maybe could put up with this much bullshit. They'll nope out, and they'll be replaced by some brain-rotted meme warrior fresh out of the campus liberal or conservative or NDP club who will just go along with it. I think the path we're on is not towards gradual improvement. I think it's fairly rapid worsening.
Well, look, maybe that's true, and I have no reason to be optimistic at present. The only thing I would say is that people's behavior aligns with their incentives, right?
Yeah.
So if your incentive is to be a brain-rotted yes man who does everything that you are told, then you'll continue to act that way. What I'm saying is the consistency of minority parliaments and the normalization of floor crossing over time will shift incentives.
Well, look, I mean, probably not, but hopefully. I wanted to bring up, it's related to this. I don't mean to go on at length here, but I've been asked a couple of times this week, I think in good faith, people going, why isn't the media talking so much about what's happening in the Conservative caucus with one guy resigning, one guy crossing the floor, continued rumors that there are more who are going to be crossing the floor. The Liberals have not given up. They're still working on that. Like they still have a list of targets.
They're doing their job. And if the Conservatives were doing their job, they'd be trying to gain people back and maybe even make some counter moves, man.
It's what Jen said a minute ago. Like the Liberals are optimizing to their incentives, and their incentives right now are encouraging them to get people to come across because that's in their best interest. One of the things I've been asked though is why is there so much attention on this and the continuing speculation, and no one is paying any attention to what Nate Erskine-Smith, the former Liberal cabinet minister, now MP, it's still a Liberal MP, had said. For those who don't remember, it's worth recapping really briefly what happened here, because Nate has been, what's that terrible cliche, the maverick for years. Like he's never been as in on party loyalty as others. Before the last election, he announced he wasn't running again. And then Trudeau put him in cabinet as housing minister, but on the condition that he agreed to stand and run again. He did. He won. Carney dropped him from cabinet immediately.
Yeah, he got the driver for like 6 weeks. Yeah.
I shouldn't laugh, but
it's pretty funny. Sorry, Nate, but it's funny. Look, we're going to talk about Nate during our second segment. Should we want to put a pin in that and come back?
I wasn't really, honestly, I was planning on talking just remembrance stuff in the second. I think I can fold it, everything I was going to say, I can fold into this one.
Okay.
I know it's long. I won't take too long. To the people who want to know why the media is focused on problems in Carney's caucus with people quitting, as opposed to the problems in Carney's caucus, which is that Nate has come out and criticized the budget. He didn't like the environmental plan. He didn't like the housing plan. Those aren't really apples to apples, are they? Like, of course, the media is going to be more interested in the caucus that has lost 2 MPs in a week than the one where the maverick did a mavericky thing. And to your point, Jen,
criticize the budget.
Yeah. And to your point a minute ago, when you're talking about like emboldening MPs, there's not a lot I agree with Nate on policy. And to be honest, over the last couple of years in particular, I've found myself agreeing with him less and less on policy, particularly some of the Middle Eastern stuff. I think he's on the wrong side on that one. I think he's been pretty enthusiastically about being on the wrong side. But that doesn't mean I wish there weren't hundreds of more MPs who actually told us what they really thought.
Well, look, and also, can I also just say, like, look, if the NDP were smart, their path back to legitimate party status is getting someone like Nate to cross the floor for them.
Mm-hmm.
Duh.
Yeah, it's just
duh.
Polyev said this week, he was asked a question.
If I were a smart conservative, I'd be putting resources behind the NDP to get a couple of floor crossers on their side.
Polyev was asked this week by a reporter, do you plan on making any changes? And he went, no, of course not. And of course he's not. Like, how many podcasts in the spring did we spend talking about the fact that Polyev is apparently incapable of rapid response to change? I think
more than I'd like to recall. I'm still traumatized.
I think we've pretty much established the problem on that front. And to me, like, I wish Parliament was full of hundreds of more MPs who were willing to speak out on the issues they agree with, like Nate was. I just wish I agreed with them more. So,
well,
yeah.
Wait and see. We'll see where this goes. As I said, there's been this is a really interesting moment in political history where MPs could use this moment to take individual power back from increasingly centralized and dysfunctional party apparatuses.
Who knows?
You know what I'm saying? Apparati. I mean,
I think
this could be it.
But whatever.
This would require them to have some balls,
Garumba.
and we don't call them collectively gormless for nothing.
Yeah,
but
yeah, no, it's like we're expecting the Fraudsters League to come up with like a code of conduct. It's not going to go well. And
well, change begins with you, man.
better is always possible.
Better is always. And like, I'm not saying this because I'm naive about D'Entremont here. I'm not making that argument. Like, the Conservatives said D'Entremont basically crossed the floor in a huff because he wasn't made deputy speaker, and this is all personal. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe, sure, but
Sure.
even if he's totally motivated by individual interest, it's politics, motherfuckers. Yeah. All individuals are motivated by some degree of personal interest. Like, you play.
The conservative defenses aren't good.
No,
and the conservative defenses for D'Entremont are basically, well, he's a scumbag who proudly carried our party's banner 6 months ago. Like, shut up.
Yeah.
And the other one, of course, on Généraux is, well, he was planning on quitting and moving to a different province anyway, which is why he ran to represent the people of Alberta. Guys, come on. This is stupid. Your defenses are confessions. They make you look bad. Can I ask you one quick question, then we'll wrap this up, though? And I'm going to confess.
Sure.
I cannot do what I'm about to ask you to do.
Okay.
Can you name the 3 major party candidates in your federal riding in the last election? I can't.
Oh, I could during the election.
I couldn't have. I mean, maybe I could have briefly. So,
yeah, I could during the election. Yeah, no, but I mean, I've got. Yeah, no. I know who my representative is now that she's been elected.
Yeah.
And I could during the election. I could name the others.
I don't know if I could have.
Like, I don't remember now. No, but I also don't think that says anything now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the election was 6 months ago. Do I remember the 2 people who were defeated on the ballot 6 months ago? No.
So 6 months ago, I knew that the Liberal was Rob Oliphant. He was the incumbent, and I know him a little. There was a Conservative challenger whose name is on the tip of my tongue, and I don't think I ever knew the name of the NDP. Probably, like, if you had hypnotized me, I probably could have come up with it, because I'm sure I drove past signs. But it's my job to know this stuff, and I'm drifting towards just looking at them as interchangeable party automatons.
But listen, that's what's got to change. That's what's got to change. And as I said, like, I don't think it's necessary. Your understanding of our personal memories are not capacious. Like, I understand that I can't. I said I'm not sure that's a fair point, because, like, as I said, I knew the names when I was actually doing the Google research level that I needed to get elected.
If you knew the names then and you looked into it, I will spot you that and salute you. I'm telling you, I don't think I could have.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I find this is part of the reason why I'm sort of passionate about this, is because I see in politics in Alberta one of the major corrosive effects of being like the conservative heartland, which I think is debatable, but that's another conversation, is that when there's an underlying assumption that only the conservative candidate can get elected, then the competition doesn't happen during the election. The competition happens during the nomination process, right? Like, that's when the fights start to happen. And that means that, you know, the people who are effectively getting elected are the hyper engaged, most committed, most crazy-eyed people
in
the party who are controlling the nomination process.
Yeah, and they stack the constituency offices.
They stack into, and like that is how you create essentially one-party rule. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is that over time, what that does is it means that if you have any ambition to get into politics, and any real ability to get into politics, almost regardless of your personal beliefs, you're running for the one governing party. Yeah. Because that's the only place where you can allow that talent to come forth at all. And it over time weakens and attenuates the competitiveness of any other party, because it becomes a self-fulfilling, a non-virtuous circle where anybody with talent is just going to the governing party, and anybody else just gets shunted out to this increasingly symbolic process where they're like, well, I guess I'll be the paper candidate for the NDP, or I guess I'll be the paper candidate for the Liberal here. And over time, that basically creates a system that's non-adversarial. And we see that an end effect of a non-adversarial system is both hyperpartisanship, total party control, and weak candidates.
Well, and corruption too, because
corruption and weak candidacy. So like this only stops one way. And it only stops with the way that the people who have actually been elected eventually decide to start standing up for themselves and for their duties and responsibilities to their constituents, having respect for how the system is supposed to work.
I have terrible news.
Well, no, look, I get it. But like I said, this is part of why I've devoted the last 39 minutes talking about this on this podcast, right? Because people need to be educated about what the system is actually supposed to do. So that's me. That's it. That's all I have to say. I think we should like and subscribe there, and then we should talk about Remembrance Day.
Yeah. Jen, you just came back from a trip. I want to ask you a question, and this is a non-shaming question. Were you even home on Remembrance Day? Like, when did you get back from your trip?
Okay, so I did get back to my trip before Remembrance Day, but by the time I got back, I had 2 kids I was taking care of home alone, and I had 15 million errands to run, and I was also jet lagged as hell.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's why I figured. I didn't even know what day you got back. On Remembrance Day, which was Tuesday this week, I had some afternoon meetings downtown. And normally what I do on Remembrance Day is I go to the ceremony at Sunnybrook Hospital, which is pretty close to where I live. There's a war memorial there. Sunnybrook to this day has a wing at the hospital that deals with military veterans. They're obviously older now, but with more recent wars, there are some younger patients now there too. It's a beautiful ceremony. And if you're anywhere in Midtown Toronto, the Sunnybrook November 11th ceremony is always great. But this year I had to be downtown. So I went down a bit early and I went to the ceremony at Queen's Park. Queen's Park is where they have the artillery salute that you can hear all through downtown. 21 guns firing every minute, starting at 11 o'clock, and one cannon firing on every minute for 21 minutes. There was no one there. It was me. I exaggerate when I say that there was no one there, but there were not a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And the weather in Toronto this week has weirdly sucked. We've had like full winter, blizzardy, freezing cold, blowing snow. It's going to be gone in a couple of days. Maybe there are people who would normally put on their fall jacket and get their asses to a November 11th ceremony who looked out the window at snow and ice and freezing temperatures and went, no, not this year. But I was really surprised. There's another ceremony they always do in downtown Toronto. It's the Old City Hall ceremony. I've been to that one before too. It's beautiful. There's another war memorial there. I didn't go to that one this year, but I did check the news coverage. Hundreds of people gathered at Old City Hall. The largest metro area in the country was coming up short. I'm going to say in defense to it, there are always smaller community ceremonies that might pull a little bit away from the bigger ones. Mount Pleasant Cemetery has the Royal Canadian Air Force Memorial. Our friend John Wright is involved in that. One of my personal friends was involved in a ceremony of a Canadian soldier who was recently identified, and they had a little bit of a ceremony in his community. So there's little things. Halifax, where our friend Rob lives, he was telling me it was packed. All the ceremonies were packed. And I'm not trying to go full culture war Don Cherry here, but I was a little bit alarmed by how few people I saw showing up in Toronto. And I don't know if it's a weather thing or a Toronto thing, but
it
did
could
not
be a
feel
weather
so
thing.
good.
It could be a weather thing. It could be an age thing, and it could be a demographics thing. So I would say, here's the thing I would notice. Alberta, I went to the Remembrance Day ceremonies, I believe, last year. And generally speaking, I think those are well attended. We also have in Calgary a really, really beautiful white crosses thing that, like, we set up crosses for the people part of the committees here set up white crosses for every I believe Calgarian who died in the World Wars. And with their names and their pictures and everything. And it's quite a display, and they do it right next to memorials. So you have to drive by it during a major thoroughfare of the city. And it's quite a display. So ironically, for all of Alberta's grievance-fueled resentment and separatist wankery, that is paradoxically twinned with, I think, a higher degree of, for lack of a better term, civic Canadianness.
We've noticed.
Yeah,
which is why your threats don't go that far.
Well, it's true. It's just like, grr, we want to separate from Canada, and God damn it, we'll celebrate Canada Day harder than the rest of you, you progressive assholes.
Guy with maple leaf tattoo weeping maple syrup is threatening separation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it's actually really quite ironic. And a part of that is because I think Albertans fundamentally are a bit more conservative. And as conservatives respect the foundational kind of mythologies that underpin the country's sense of self. And I think that conservatives do this right now better than progressives have chosen to in recent years. But yeah, so I think that your observation is probably correct. To some extent, I do think that it is possible that Remembrance Day is just going to become a less and less significant holiday as people age out.
Yep.
Right? Like our generation, I think, was really the last generation that took this really, really seriously. And like we had this drilled into us that this was a serious thing in school. And increasingly, you've got younger kids in school. They still do stuff for Remembrance Day in schools. It's still a thing. But over time, I think a lot of the message of Remembrance Day is getting diluted with their kinds of political movements and political messages. This week, it was come to the attention, for example, that not only was there a land acknowledgement at the City of Toronto's Remembrance Day ceremony, there was also a slavery acknowledgement at the City of Toronto's Remembrance Day ceremony. And I want to just say, like, I think that it's perfectly historically valid to do a land acknowledgement. I have no issues with having in-depth conversations with the history of slavery in Canada and the British colonies, and that so long as those conversations are grounded in real history as opposed to a kind of popularized history that's being adopted from the United States, which I think some of this is. But I don't think Remembrance Day is the appropriate time or place to be doing a slavery acknowledgement. Like that not only is that not historically, that's ahistoric, frankly, the way that they did it specifically, but also the more, you slap on more progressive movements onto this day and use this day as a platform for those movements, the more you dilute the actual purpose of this day, right? Which is not only
I'm not convinced that's an accident.
Oh, no, I'm sure it is.
This day in particular?
Yeah, exactly. If you want to have like a conversation about Canada reckons with its history and slavery, you can devote its own day to that. That's fine. I have no issue with that. But this day has a very specific meaning and purpose. And that Remembrance Day is about remembering specifically the veterans of all races, by the way, who died in the World Wars, which included many Black and Indigenous Canadians as well. And the fact that we collectively come together as this shared mourning ritual also serves a civic purpose about creating us, again, if a nation is nothing more than a story that people tell themselves about who they are, Remembrance Day is part of the Canadian story. Mm-hmm. And so attempting to undermine and dilute that story, I think, has a very pernicious purpose that is intended to undermine that sense of national unity and narrative. So I just don't think that it's the appropriate time and a place for us to have historical reckonings about unrelated issues.
I agree with you completely. The problem is, of course, the moment you say that, and I'll put myself on the firing line with you here because I think you're exactly right. But there's going to be people going, but there's never a bad time to have your historical reckoning. No, first of all, there can be, because there are things that I think, Jen, you used the perfect word. You said diluted. I think that's bang on. But I also think like this is just another example, Jen, of like our progressives evolving into panda bears who have absolutely no instinct for self-preservation.
Yes, they already have. But I mean, like, okay, of course there's a wrong time and a place to be bringing something. If you were having like a Black History Month event down at the City of Toronto, and if I were to barge in there talking about the history of like indentured Irish servants, that would obviously be an inappropriate time, inappropriate place. And I would be making, in that situation, I'd be making a very conscious effort to undermine and dilute your message with a different type of historical narrative. I wouldn't support that, by the way. I don't think that would be appropriate. But essentially, the progressive attempt to do the same in this situation, to dilute a shared memorial that is particularly important to older Canadians and more conservative Canadians, I think that's purposeful and malicious in exactly the same kind of way, and for exactly the same kind of reasons.
It's also, to your point, Jen, though, it's unnecessary.
It's
because
unnecessary.
Black Canadians, Asian Canadians, absolutely Indigenous Canadians fought in the Canadian units in both world wars and in all the conflicts and peace missions we've had since. Women have fought.
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ, and I'm sure there's more characters to add, people have fought and served. All of their stories should be honored.
Well, and
all of their stories should be part of Remembrance Day. All of their stories should be taught.
One of the things that I really like about the way that Calgary does its memorials is that it includes, where possible, pictures, names, and a little bit of history of the individuals who died. And you start to, when you go through that, you start to realize, again, there's lots of people of color here. There were Jews in here. There were people who weren't Christian in here. There were people, like, don't get me wrong, a lot of them were white male Canadians for sure, but by no means all. And not nearly as many as you'd think. And what I really love about the way that the Memorial Day system is structured is that you really see that. This was very much a cross-section of the demographics of Calgary at that moment in history. And it's correct that we should honor them all. So yeah, I hear what you're saying here. And I to some extent, I think that a winnowing of the importance or an attenuation of the importance of Remembrance Day is inevitable with passage of time.
Yeah.
Right? As the passage of living memory starts to collapse. Do you know actually one of the real tragedies in Calgary? We have a World War, I believe, a cenotaph memorial in one of the central parks that has been closed off for I don't know how many weeks because it keeps on getting vandalized. They've literally put like gates around it. Because
who's
they can't.
Vandalizing it? Like, is it a cause or is it just idiots? Or
it's right across from a safe consumption site, so who the hell knows?
Boy, yeah,
yeah. But essentially, they've put gates up around it. You can't go and touch the memorial on that. You can't go up and close to it. Like they've put gates around it because it can't be trusted not to be vandalized.
I was talking with some friends about this week, and this is one of those oh my God, we're getting old moments. And I know our listeners who are older roll their eyes when we say this, but like the 1990s was 30 years ago, and it doesn't feel like that. But yeah. What do you mean? It was yesterday. But in the 1990s, we had war veterans who were in their 60s, who were healthy, recently retired guys. They would come to our assemblies. They would talk with us. They'd talk with the kids. Yeah. And the Legion and stuff were usually, or local committees, they were usually pretty good about picking guys who were charming and funny and good with kids and, you know, could tell a joke, but also were effective communicators. I remember going once to a really bad, it sounds bad. I went to a really bad Remembrance Day ceremony where they were clearly really happy to get a veteran, but the veteran unfortunately had no knack for public speaking and was clearly terrified. It didn't go well for anybody. But in general, they were pretty good at finding really good speakers. And I remember those. 30 plus years later, I remember those. And I asked my kids this week what they did for Remembrance Day. And God bless the teachers. They're trying. Like they're trying to put together like a performance of things that are valuable and evocative and will be emotionally resonant. But nothing does it like the being on a stage listening to an old man crying in front of my elementary school talking about the day before the war when his buddy was killed and the war ended the next day and he didn't feel happy. He felt ripped off. He was like, if it had ended one day sooner, my best friend is still here. That stuff gets seared into you. So I think you're right. We do lose the living memory.
Well, and that we also lost grandparents, remember? Because our grandparents were overwhelmingly, because we're in our 40s, so our grandparents were veterans of the war. So we have a direct living memory, whereas my children will come of age with no living connection here to the war at all. And it's just an abstract. I mean, God, I remember I was watching this video of September 11th for some reason. I fell down the September 11th video rabbit hole on YouTube for some reason. And I was watching like videos from September 11th of people who caught the planes going into the towers and the planes crashing. And I, of course, remember seeing all that stuff at the time.
Your kids won't care.
Well, no, but they did. And what was fascinating about it is that you go through the comment section around YouTube, and it's filled with these young people who are just like, wow, like I didn't live through this, but it's incredible that this film was shot and that we can understand or have some emotional connection to this, you know, however many years later. So I think September 11th isn't going to pass from collective knowledge in the same way that World War I and World War II did, simply because bluntly, there was lots of video footage, but it's really, really grainy black and white video footage. And even the living memory of like black and white video being the norm is starting to shift out. So it looks very surreal. It looks really distant, even in a way that's like you watch 9/11 footage now and like, oh wow, the resolution on those videos I don't remember them being that grainy, right? But they were, of course, just that our resolutions improved over time. But that there's an immediacy to even the 9/11 videos that doesn't exist with the World War II videos. So it's like it really does feel like a really, really long time ago now, in a way that other types of historical events that were more recent don't.
My great grandfather, well, one of them, was wounded in action in the First World War, and we have his war records, and it's fascinating to read through them, and it's all very bureaucratic, but you can reconstruct the entire chain of his injury. There was the first, like the field ambulance wrote a quick casualty card, these are his injuries, applied these treatments, evacuating him here. Then there's records from that place of, okay, this guy needs surgery. We need to get him here. And you can reconstruct all of it. So I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole recently looking at these old documents, and the place where the battle was fought, typical for a lot of First and Second World War battles, it's now just some French dude's farm. Like literally, it's a working farm where every couple of years the guy's out plowing the fields and he finds another body because the soil gets turned over and remains surface even 100 years later. And I fell down this rabbit hole of reading about this Frenchman, this French farmer in this small village in northwestern France, who ended up becoming affiliated to this day with the Canadian Army unit, which still exists, the regiment that fought there in this day, and how he kept turning up artifacts and sending them home to the Canadians. Found a boot, found a watch, found this stuff. The Europeans are better at this, maybe because it's such a lived experience. But the cliche, right? Oh, the Dutch have never forgotten what we did for them in the Second World War. Hearing about this Frenchman who was not born in the war, making it his life's mission to return to the Canadians what they had left. There are stories that are going to be that we could teach. Like our Remembrance Day ceremonies could teach this stuff. So I'm not giving up on it. But boy, you're not wrong. It gets harder when the lived memory goes away.
Well,
it's so hard to do it.
Here's my broader question here, because I don't think that it was kind. Frankly, I don't think it was kind to try and dilute the message of Remembrance Day with a slavery acknowledgement. And I'm not saying that as someone who thinks that we shouldn't acknowledge the history of slavery in the British colonies and all the rest. I'm fine with that. But I think that it was a very purposefully malicious and unkind choice to try and do that during Remembrance Day. I don't think it was a kind thing to do, because I think it was politically motivated, and ideologically motivated. But here is an interesting, deeper question here, and that is, what is the obligation? What is the obligation? Well, what is the obligation for, as we move further and further away in history, as we lose living memory, right? I mean, I think our generation is going to be the last generation to have that kind of tangential touch point, that our grandparents are the last memory of living memory. Our kids and our grandkids will have no touch point to that living memory at all. So the living memory to those cenotaphs, the living memory to these ceremonies is going to become thinner and thinner from here on out. And as we have more and more new Canadians come in who didn't even have those grandparents who fought in the war, who didn't have those even kin relationships to a lot of these types of memories, what's their obligation? Do they have an obligation? And what's the obligation to? Right?
That's a fascinating question. Yeah,
I think it's a really
question.
Yeah. If your family came to Canada from wherever, who knows, who cares, in say 1992, and your family has no connection to the World Wars, you didn't lose anybody in the World Wars, those World Wars were not your World Wars, what is your obligation? What's the obligation that you have to teach your kids to participate in these ceremonies?
Yep.
And how long does that obligation carry forward?
I've told you this before. As regular listeners will know, my wife is a teacher, and she had told me once about a really interesting debate And it was, I don't want people to get all pissed off. Oh, it was the woke. No, I think eventually the teachers made the right decision here, but they were like, how the hell do we talk about Remembrance Day during the Afghan war when we have a couple of Afghan families in the school? We don't know how they feel about this. So there are interesting tensions. Ultimately, they decided it's Canada. We talk about Canadian military history on Remembrance Day. So I give them a thumbs up for what they decided. No, it's a fantastic question. I don't think there's an easy answer to it, because the reality of it is someone who is themselves an immigrant to Canada or is a child of immigrants to Canada probably doesn't get verklempt the way I do about Private Gurney getting shot off his horse in 1918.
Hey, you don't have stories of grandpa in the Navy like I do, right? Like, I get it.
But I do think you asked the question really well, which is, what is the obligation? And I think there is an obligation, right? Because, and it's self-interested, but you and I have talked about this a lot. It seems like human lived memory has a time horizon of maybe 70 to 100 years, at which point we just do it all over again and are shocked. Like, oh, wow. Like you were like, like a lot of my Jewish friends are very alarmed of, you know what? Like we had a really good run after the Holocaust, but now it's the anti-Semitism is just coming back because the Holocaust is abstract. And I think military memorial serves the same purpose. And I don't mean like a statue or a flame or something. I mean, literally the memory of past wars. When you start to lose them, I think you start finding yourself in a situation where you're probably going to start getting into some of that shit again. So I wish today our far right and far left had both actually studied the early 20th century a little bit more, because some of this feels very familiar. So I think there is a societal obligation to try and teach this stuff. But kind of as we were talking about in the first segment, do I expect it to work? No. Probably one of the lessons of human history is we do forget and learn it again.
And here's the thing. Who is the obligation to? Because the dead don't care. Right? Increasingly, the living veterans have passed because they've aged out, and the dead don't care. So who is the obligation to? Is the obligation to shared and collective history so that we can understand the depths of what happens when, human societies polarize and come to blows? Is the obligation to some sort of abstracted notion of Canada? Is the debt to, who is the debt? What is the obligation and who is the debt to? And I think that, or is the obligation that we all participate in at least one shared ceremony as a polity for the sake of engaging in a shared ceremony as a polity? And I think that's valid, by the way. I think it is valid to ask us to engage in a shared ceremony. I think shared ceremonies are important. Shared festivals are hugely important. They don't necessarily need to be my festivals, but I do think we need to be sharing in festivals and ceremonies. I really want to actually think that I want us to all start celebrating Diwali. I love Diwali. You know what I mean? I don't care what the festivals are, but I think that shared festivals and memorials are really important. Shared festivals and memorials are really important.
National Corn Roast Day.
Who cares?
You have to go roast corn with your neighbors.
We will all celebrate the tapping of the maple trees for the maple. This will become sacred. Pick something. I don't give a shit, but it has to be something. And Remembrance Day should be one of those shared ceremonies in which we can all engage in, because everybody who comes here or has been here for any length of time should be able to see a human story that they can connect with in Remembrance Day. So there's an obvious one there. It doesn't have to be just that one, but there's an obvious one there. There's a reason why we cling to that one. But yeah, as I said, it's just, time is going to force us to ask this question. Demographics are going to force us to ask this question. What are the shared ceremonies? What are the shared stories that we're going to continue on in order to maintain our perception of a nation? The story that we tell of ourselves to ourselves. That is a question we need to be able to answer for ourselves. What is our obligation? Who is the obligation to, and for what purpose does it exist? And Remembrance Day is increasingly going to force us to answer those questions for ourselves. And I think that's a really interesting one.
I want to wrap this up because I got to go eat something. But to the extent I can answer the question, I would answer it like this. The obligation we have is to ourselves and each other and the country at large to not make the same mistakes over and over again. And I know it's inevitable that we do. Human beings are what they are. but something as awful as war should induce caution and humility for a time. And I'm not saying cowardice or pacifism, right? Because I think, every November 11th, you see people saying the lesson of these wars is that war is stupid. No, that's not the lesson. The lesson is fight the right wars and fight them for the right reasons and hopefully win them. But
and don't be naive about what the right wars are and the degree to which you can fool yourself into believing you're fighting the right wars.
You have to know the cost. You have to know the value, right? And these are the lessons that I think we owe it to ourselves to remember. But I'll end on an observation, and you can respond to it or not. But one of the things, when I've been going to Remembrance Day ceremonies like my whole life, and I used to think about the big picture issues Jen's talking about, the country, unity, shared sacrifice. Maybe I'm just getting older, but I think about that less and less now. One of the things I realized when I was at a war grave, a Commonwealth war grave in Europe a number of years ago, and to my horror, I began to realize how all the headstones, I was just doing the math, they were all younger than I was, even the officers. And now I'm even older. I wouldn't have been the 20-something going up the ladder over the trenches and getting machine gunned. I would have been the lieutenant colonel in a bunker somewhere sending those poor bastards up to die. And what I was thinking about was how scared they must have been. And it's just like, as I get older, my interest in the big picture has gotten less. And I find myself thinking about the people. And maybe that's a lesson. Maybe that's just a process of aging. Maybe that's just me. Like there could be no grander meaning to it all. But I think whatever the meaning of Remembrance Day is and should be from like a civic perspective, I think we should also just think for a minute about what we asked those guys to do. And for the most part, what they did. And I don't know why, as I get older, I just find myself thinking what it would be like for someone not that much older than my daughter, much closer to my kid's age than mine, being told, go take that hill. And you've got a 50-50 chance at best of seeing that next hour roll by. And that's what I think about. And I don't know how you capture that in a ceremony. I don't know how you teach that. I think to your point, as you start to lose the living memory, it gets a lot harder. It's a lot easier to put a veteran in front of a class and have them tell the horrible experiences than it is to get a bunch of people to imagine them. But that's kind of where my brain goes about this. And I stood out there listening to the cannons, and I just wasn't thinking about unity. I was just thinking about how scared they must have been. So there you go.
Well, on that note, like and subscribe. Check us out, www.readtheline.ca. We were going to have a busy week next week, I think. And that's all we have.
That's all we have.